My father's voice cracked through the dining room like thunder. $150,000! Where did it go? My fork froze midair, my pulse pounding in my ears. My brother sat beside me, his face pale as paper, but everyone's eyes locked on me. I wanted to shout, "What money?" But the silence pressed heavier than chains. For years, I believed in our polished family image, in loyalty, in love, but that question opened a door I never dared to touch. I didn't know it then, but stepping through would shatter everything I thought I knew about us. I used to believe my family was untouchable, a flawless portrait hung high above the world. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American dream, a sprawling suburban mansion with white pillars, manicured lawns, and a driveway that gleamed with polished cars. Every holiday, we gathered in matching outfits for carefully staged photographs, images that were immediately posted online with captions about gratitude, love, and togetherness. Strangers would comment, "What a beautiful family." Friends envied us, wishing their lives could be half as radiant. But those pictures were like painted masks, hiding fractures no one else could see. The photo that haunted me most hung in the hallway by the staircase. We were all smiling, dressed in crisp white, the beach behind us glowing gold with the sunset. At first glance, it radiated joy, unity, success. Yet, whenever I walked by, I noticed the frame's edge, where the wood had begun to splinter, a hairline crack that seemed to grow year after year, unnoticed by everyone but me. That crack became my secret metaphor, proof that beneath the gloss, something was rotting. Inside those walls, the truth was much less glamorous. My father's affection came with strings, rewards only if you played the role he had written for you. My mother floated like a silent moon, reflecting his moods, but never casting her own light. And then there was Daniel, my younger brother, the golden boy. He wasn't particularly accomplished, but he didn't have to be. Father adored him, showered him with second chances no matter how badly he failed. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one, the daughter who built a career, paid her own bills, kept the family's image polished. Yet no matter how much I achieved, it was never enough. That evening, as we sat around the dining table beneath a chandelier sparkling like starlight, everything looked perfect again. The roast was steaming, the silverware gleamed, and laughter filled the room. But my father's laughter never reached his eyes, and my brother's smile seemed forced, as if hiding a shadow. I was sipping my wine when I noticed a detail that made my stomach drop. The monthly financial statements, usually stacked neatly in Father's leather briefcase, were lying loose on the sideboard. My eyes caught a number that didn't make sense, a withdrawal of $150,000. The amount leapt off the page, bold and glaring like blood on snow. My hand trembled as I set down my glass. "Dad?" I asked carefully. "What happened to this?" I gestured toward the paper, my voice steady but my heart racing. His eyes flicked to mine, then away. "You worry too much, Madison," he said lightly, though his tone carried an edge I couldn't miss. "It's nothing you need to concern yourself with." Before I could press, Daniel leaned in, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Yeah, Mads, maybe lay off the work stress, huh? You're reading too much into numbers again." Heat rose in my chest. "I'm not imagining things. This isn't pocket change. Where did it go?" Silence. My mother shifted in her seat, her fork clinking softly against her plate. My father chuckled, the kind of chuckle that sounded generous to anyone who didn't know him as I did. "Sweetheart," he said, smiling as though pacifying a child, "sometimes money moves around. Investments, expenses. You don't need to play detective every time." But his eyes betrayed him. There was something sharp there, something that made my throat tighten. It wasn't reassurance. It was a warning. I wanted to push harder, to demand the truth, but I felt the weight of the room pressing against me. My brother's smirk, my father's mask of patience, my mother's silence. They surrounded me like walls, making me doubt myself. Was I paranoid? Was I, as they suggested, just too stressed? I excused myself early, retreating to my room. Yet even there, the questions clawed at me. I replayed the scene in my head. The quick deflection, Daniel's eagerness to dismiss me, Father's smile that felt more like a barbed wire fence than comfort. The number wouldn't leave my mind. $150,000. That wasn't an oversight. That was a choice. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the moonlight slicing across the floor. A whisper crept into my thoughts, uninvited but persistent. What if they already decided you would take the blame? My chest tightened. It sounded absurd, but so did the crack in the photo frame until it became impossible to ignore. I thought of the countless times Father had found ways to belittle me, to hold me responsible for keeping the family's reputation spotless. I thought of Daniel's failures swept under the rug, his mistakes forgiven before they even stained the carpet. What if this time the rug wasn't big enough? What if they needed someone else to absorb the blow? Someone expendable? I wrapped my arms around myself, shivering though the room was warm. A part of me wanted to laugh it off, to dismiss the suspicion as another bout of overthinking. But another part, the deeper, quieter voice I had spent years silencing, told me I was standing on the edge of something dangerous. If I stepped forward, I might find answers. If I stepped back, I could pretend everything was fine, like the polished pictures on our walls. I didn't know which path I would take, but I do know this. If I had dared to dig deeper that night, I would have uncovered the rot sooner. And maybe, just maybe, everything would not have spiraled into the nightmare that followed. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the house shifted in ways so subtle I might have missed them if I hadn't already been on edge. It started with small exclusions. Conversations about the family's business, which had always included me, suddenly happened behind closed doors. The dining room, once a place of casual chatter, grew quieter whenever I entered. And Daniel, who had never cared about anything beyond his next thrill, suddenly walked around with an air of authority, carrying folders, fielding phone calls, sitting beside my father with a seriousness I had never seen in him before. At breakfast one morning, Father announced it plainly. "Daniel will be managing our family's accounts from now on," he said, pouring himself coffee as if he were noting the weather. "You've been working too hard, Madison. It's time you took a step back." I blinked. "What do you mean, step back? I've always handled the reports. I know where everything goes." My mother's voice floated in, soft and almost sorrowful, as though she were delivering comfort instead of betrayal. "Sweetheart, you've been under so much stress. You need to focus on your health. Let Daniel carry some weight." Carry weight. The irony was sharp enough to draw blood. Daniel had never carried anything in his life. He grinned at me across the table, smug, as if he'd won a silent game neither of us had agreed to play. I felt the ground beneath me slipping. It wasn't just about money, it was about identity. If I was no longer the one they trusted with responsibility, then who was I in this family? A guest? An accessory for their photos? A shadow? Still, I tried to reason. I'm not sick. I don't need to rest. And Daniel doesn't have the experience to— Enough! Father's voice cracked like a whip. He set down his mug, eyes narrowing. "This is not a debate. Your brother will handle it. You should be grateful for the break." I pressed my lips together. Arguing would be useless. Their minds were already made up, their concern nothing more than a disguise. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. For the first time, I wondered if their plan all along was not to protect me, but to erase me. At night, I lay awake, listening to the faint murmur of voices downstairs. I heard Daniel's laugh, low and conspiratorial. I caught Father's gruff approval, words muffled but heavy. They sounded like men building an alliance, and I, once the one they leaned on, was no longer even in the room. I didn't know it then, but by pushing me out, they weren't protecting me. They were laying the groundwork for something far more sinister. I couldn't see the trap yet, but it was already being set. I didn't know that by the time it snapped shut, my own family would be the ones tightening the rope. The confirmation came at the next family gathering. The dining room was full, grandparents, cousins, aunts, and uncles. The table stretched long and glittered with crystal glasses, the kind of setting that begged for photographs. I should have felt warmth, surrounded by relatives, But instead, I felt a storm brewing under the polished surface. Father stood to make a toast, his voice carried easily, practiced, like a politician addressing a crowd. "We are blessed," he began, smiling toward the guests, "to have such a strong, loyal family." His eyes swept the room before narrowing slightly, lingering on me. "But loyalty must be tested, and sometimes trust can be broken." A murmur rippled through the table. My pulse quickened. I didn't like where this was going. Father continued, his voice steady but sharp. "A sum of money, substantial, $150,000, has gone missing, and I fear it may have been taken from within." Gasps echoed. My cousins glanced at one another. I felt dozens of eyes swing toward me. My breath caught in my throat. I waited for Daniel to speak, to stand up, to say something, anything that would redirect the suspicion. But he sat rigid, his jaw clenched, his face pale. His silence was louder than any accusation. A chill swept over me. Did he know? Was he protecting himself by staying quiet? And then the voice I least expected pierced the air. My mother. Gentle, always smoothing conflict, never one to accuse. She leaned forward, her eyes on me, and said softly, "Madison, you need to explain this." The words cut deeper than any scream. They didn't sound like concern. They sounded like condemnation. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The woman who had once held me when I was sick, who had whispered encouragement before every school recital, who had been my quiet ally in this house of sharp edges, was now casting me as the thief. My vision blurred as I tried to find my voice. "What are you saying? I didn't—" But the murmurs around me drowned out my protest. Whispers spread like fire, cousins and uncles exchanging glances, aunts shaking their heads. The family's perfect image, the one they paraded online, demanded a scapegoat. And apparently, I was it. I looked from face to face, searching for anyone who would defend me. My father's cold gaze, Daniel's silence, my mother's quiet betrayal. Not one voice rose in my defense. The room spun. My pulse roared in my ears. I had never felt more alone, not even in a room full of people who shared my blood. That night, as I lay awake replaying every word, the truth slammed into me with brutal clarity. Even my mother, the one person I believed would stand by me, had chosen her side. And it wasn't mine. The accusations at the dinner table did not end with whispers. Within days, rumors spread through the extended family like wildfire. I returned home one evening to find a folder waiting on my desk, neatly placed as if it had been delivered by some invisible courier. Inside were printed emails and bank records, documents supposedly showing transfers in my name. The dates were carefully chosen, coinciding with times I had been traveling for work. On the surface, it looked damning. To anyone who didn't know me, it painted a portrait of greed and betrayal. I flipped through the pages, my hands trembling. The email headers bore my address, but the language was wrong. Too formal, too stiff. The bank slips had my signature, but the strokes looked rushed, unnatural, like someone trying to mimic my handwriting. I knew it was forged, yet a deep dread coiled in my stomach. Would anyone else believe me? My father gathered the family again, this time in the living room where portraits of ancestors hung like silent judges. He held the papers aloft, shaking them for emphasis. "Here is the proof," he declared. "She has betrayed us." Gasps, murmurs, the weight of eyes pressing on me. I wanted to scream that it was false, that someone had planted the evidence, but the certainty in his voice drowned me out. I realized in that moment that truth no longer mattered. Perception did, and the perception was clear. Madison, the overachiever, had stolen from the family she claimed to love. As I stood frozen, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message. It was from my aunt, my father's sister, the one relative who had always kept her distance from family politics. "It's worse than you think. Meet me. Don't trust anyone." The words chilled me more than the accusations. Worse than this? I couldn't imagine what that meant. I clung to the thought of confiding in someone outside the house, someone who might actually listen. But before I could reply, another blow landed. My best friend, Emily, someone who had stood by me since college, sent a curt message. I heard what happened. I can't believe you do this. I need space. My vision blurred. Emily knew me better than anyone, yet even she believed the lies. The story had escaped the house, spread to the outside world. My reputation wasn't just wounded, it was collapsing. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling the walls close in. My mind replayed every betrayal, every silence, every accusing glance. The family that had once demanded my loyalty had weaponized it against me. Trust, once a fragile thread, had been cut clean through. I didn't know how much worse the truth could get, but I knew this. My faith in them, in us, was already gone. I didn't leave my room for days. Food trays appeared outside my door, untouched. I scrolled through social media where my family continued to post cheerful photos, smiling dinners, coordinated outfits, captions about gratitude. In those glossy images, they looked whole, perfect, radiant. I wasn't in a single one. One photo made me pause. It was taken in the living room, directly beneath the family portrait that had hung for years, but when I zoomed in, I saw it clearly. I had been cropped out of the frame. My space on the couch had been filled by a decorative pillow. To the outside world, it would seem like nothing. To me, it was confirmation. I wasn't just excluded, I was erased. The realization hollowed me out. I wandered the halls like a ghost, my body present but my spirit gone. Depression wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. The smallest tasks felt impossible. My once sharp voice had dulled into silence. One night, unable to sleep, I crept downstairs for water. The house was dark except for the faint glow of Father's study. I heard his voice, low and deliberate, seeping through the cracked door. "If she stays quiet, we'll be fine," he said. His tone was icy, businesslike. "But if she makes noise, we'll cut her off completely. She'll have nothing." The words struck like a blade. There was no hesitation, no grief, no trace of a father protecting his child, only calculation. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself, my knees weak. The truth was undeniable now. It wasn't just that they didn't believe me, it was that they never intended to. I was their scapegoat, their shield, the sacrifice they would offer to protect the illusion of perfection. And in that moment, standing in the shadow of his voice, I understood something that broke me more than the false accusations ever could. I had never truly been his daughter. The message from my aunt lingered in my mind until I couldn't take the silence anymore. I agreed to meet her at a small cafe on the edge of town, far from the prying eyes of our neighborhood. When I walked in, she was already there, seated in the corner, her fingers tapping nervously against a manila folder. Her eyes softened when she saw me, but her lips pressed into a tight line, as if she were carrying the weight of a secret too heavy to hold much longer. "Madison," she whispered, pulling me into a hug that felt more like a shield. "I need you to see this." She slid the folder across the table. My hands trembled as I opened it, and what I saw made my stomach twist. Bank records, contracts, emails, this time not forged, but real. Every line pointed to Daniel. Transfers to his accounts, notes about investments, signatures in his unmistakable scrawl. My breath caught. "It was him," I whispered. "All this time." My aunt nodded grimly. "Your father knows. He's known since the beginning." The words felt like a knife. "What do you mean he knew?" She leaned closer, her voice urgent. "This isn't the first time. Daniel has been pulling money for years, small amounts at first, then larger. Your father covered it up to protect him, to protect the family's reputation. He thought he could keep it quiet. But now it's too big to hide, so they need someone else to carry the blame." The room spun around me. The betrayal was deeper than I had imagined. It wasn't just Daniel's greed. It was my father's complicity, my mother's silence, an entire family willing to sacrifice me to keep their golden son untarnished. I clenched the papers in my hands, rage boiling through the grief. All those nights of gaslighting, all those whispers branding me a thief, all the smiles plastered across our staged photos. It was all a performance, and I had been cast as the villain in their script. A spark lit inside me, sharp and searing. For the first time in weeks, I felt something stronger than despair. Anger. Righteous, consuming anger. If I stayed silent, if I let them bury me under their lies, I would drown alongside them, and I wasn't willing to die their scapegoat. If I stayed silent one more time, I would die with them. That thought carried me home, sharper than any blade. I locked my bedroom door and spread the documents across my bed. The evidence was there, tangible, undeniable, but evidence meant nothing without strategy. I needed a plan. Over the next few nights, I became my own detective. I scoured old emails, bank statements, phone records. I dug through archives on the family computer when no one was looking. I photographed everything, uploading copies to hidden drives. Every file, every receipt, every trace of Daniel's recklessness and my father's cover-ups became another weapon in my arsenal. The work consumed me, but for the first time in months, I felt alive. No longer drifting like a ghost, I was focused, precise. Each new piece of evidence fueled my resolve. The deeper I dug, the more I saw the pattern. Daniel failed, father concealed, mother stayed silent, and I was left to carry the weight. Not anymore. I contacted a lawyer under the guise of an old college friend. We met discreetly, my documents spread across his desk. He examined them with a frown, nodding slowly as the truth unraveled before him. "You have enough here to expose them," he said, "but once you do, there's no going back. Are you ready for that?" The question echoed in my head long after I left his office. Was I ready? To burn the illusion, to destroy what little family I had left, to make enemies of the people who had raised me? That night, I sat alone in my room, the evidence piled around me like a fortress. I stared into the darkness and asked myself a question I had avoided for too long. If it were you, what would you do? Would you keep enduring, swallowing the lies until they consumed you? Or would you light the match and watch it all burn? I closed my eyes, and the answer came as clearly as breath. I would not endure. I would not be erased. I would fight. I gathered the papers into neat stacks, labeling them for clarity, ready to strike when the time was right. The weight of fear remained, but it no longer controlled me. In its place was something harder, sharper, resolve. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of their judgment. I was ready to deliver my own. I chose the second path. The night of the family celebration arrived cloaked in glitter and false smiles. Our house was alive with chatter, the chandelier dripping gold over a table heavy with roasted meats, crystal glasses, and polished silver. Relatives filled every chair, their voices a symphony of laughter and politeness. To them, we were still the shining portrait they admired, perfect, enviable, untouched. But beneath my calm exterior, my pulse hammered. The folder of documents rested in my bag like a loaded weapon. Tonight, the truth would no longer be hidden. My father stood, raising his glass. His voice was smooth, measured, the same tone he used when sealing deals or charming strangers. We gather tonight as a family, bound by loyalty and trust. The irony almost made me laugh. He continued, "But we must also guard against betrayal. We must hold one another accountable." His gaze brushed across me for the briefest second, cold and accusing, before moving on. I pushed back my chair. The scrape of wood against marble silenced the room. Every face turned toward me, expectant. My palms sweated, but my voice was steady. "If we're talking about loyalty, then let's tell the truth." Gasps fluttered around the table. My father's jaw tightened. "Sit down, Madison." "No," I said, my voice rising. "Not this time." I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. The sound of paper slapping against the table echoed like a gunshot. "This is what you've been hiding. The $150,000 wasn't mine. It was Daniel's. The room erupted with murmurs. I opened the folder spreading copies of bank statements, signed transfers, emails with Daniel's name and account details. Every cent leads back to him, and this, I held up another page, my hand trembling with fury, shows that Father knew. He's been covering for Daniel for years. The silence that followed was suffocating. My father's face drained of color, but before he could respond, I pressed harder. And it wasn't just the $150K. There are larger debts, older ones, hidden from all of you. The family fortune isn't as secure as you think. Shock rippled through the room like a storm wave crashing into glass. A cousin whispered, "Dear God!" And then Daniel, pale and sweating, shot to his feet. His voice cracked, louder than I'd ever heard. "Don't look at me like that. He's lying too. He taught me how to do it. He told me it was fine." He pointed at Father, his finger trembling. "He told me the money was ours to use." The room exploded. Voices clashed, relatives shouting, chairs scraping. My mother's hand flew to her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. My father roared Daniel's name, his control unraveling for the first time in my life. Cousins leaned in, whispering furiously. An uncle demanded answers. The perfect image, so carefully maintained for decades, cracked open before my eyes. And I stood at the center of it all, not broken, but steady. Within minutes, the party dissolved into chaos. Relatives confronted my father, questions firing like bullets. Daniel stammered, trying to blame me, but the evidence sat on the table for all to see. His words were drowned out by the tide of disbelief and condemnation. My mother collapsed into her chair, her sobs silent but endless. I watched her shoulders shake, realizing she wasn't crying for me. She was crying for the death of the illusion she had clung to all her life. As the shouting swelled, something strange happened inside me. For years, I had been suffocated by their lies, crushed beneath the weight of their expectations. But now, watching their empire of deception collapse, I felt lighter. The chains were falling away. A sudden crash made everyone freeze. The family portrait, the one hanging above the fireplace, slipped from its hook and shattered on the floor. Glass sprayed across the marble. The smiling faces of our staged perfection fractured into shards. It was the perfect metaphor, the end of the illusion, undeniable, irreversible. Daniel lunged forward, his voice hoarse with rage. "This is your fault, Madison. You ruined us. You wanted revenge, and now look, you've destroyed everything." I met his glare without flinching. "No, Daniel, you destroyed yourself. I just stopped covering for you." His face twisted, but he had no words left. Around us, relatives whispered, their voices carrying judgment, disgust, and pity. My father sat in silence, his hands gripping the arms of his chair as though he could still control the wreckage, but he couldn't. The empire he built on lies had collapsed in front of everyone, and for the first time, I felt something I had never allowed myself to feel in this house: freedom. In the midst of their chaos, as voices clashed and tears fell, I realized I was no longer trapped inside their story. I was writing my own, and for the first time, I breathed without fear. In a single moment, the perfect family had become a battlefield. In the days that followed the confrontation, the house fell silent, stripped of its glossy veneer. Relatives who once praised us for our unity now avoided my father's calls. Neighbors whispered when they passed, their eyes darting toward the mansion that no longer gleamed with pride but sagged beneath the weight of scandal. The curated image of the perfect family had crumbled, and no filter could disguise the truth. For the first time in years, people looked at me differently, not with suspicion or pity, but with quiet recognition. A few aunts and cousins, those who had once kept their distance, reached out in private. Their voices were hushed, almost guilty. "We're sorry, Madison. We should have known. We should have stood by you." Their apologies did not erase the wounds, but they stitched something fragile inside me. Proof that not everyone had been blind. The official vindication came when the evidence was shared beyond the family circle. Lawyers confirmed what I had already uncovered. Daniel was responsible, my father complicit. The shame spread quickly, and with it came a reluctant acknowledgement. My name, once stained by their accusations, was cleared. I no longer had to defend myself. The truth spoke louder than I ever could, but vindication was not victory. As I walked through the empty halls of the house, I realized justice had a hollow sound. It didn't return the years I'd lost, the love I thought I had, or the mother who chose silence over me. Justice stripped away illusions, but it did not restore what never truly existed. Justice did not bring them back, but it brought me closer to myself. With that realization, I knew I could not stay. The mansion was nothing but a mausoleum of memories, each room echoing with betrayal. So I packed. Not everything, just what was mine, what carried no shadow of them. Clothes, books, the hidden drives that had saved me. And then I left, locking the door behind me without looking back. The city welcomed me with anonymity. Here, I was not the disgraced daughter or the scapegoat of a broken dynasty. I was just Madison. I rented a modest apartment where laughter didn't feel staged, where silence wasn't a punishment. I found friends who didn't measure me against anyone else, colleagues who respected me for my work, not for the image I projected. Slowly, piece by piece, I began to rebuild. I learned to trust again, not in the family I was born into, but in the one I chose. We met for dinners filled with messy conversations and unfiltered joy. We celebrated birthdays with mismatched candles and laughter that needed no cameras to validate it. This new family didn't demand perfection. They demanded honesty. And in their company, I discovered something I had never truly felt in my old home: belonging. Yet I couldn't ignore the pull of what I had endured. My scars were too deep to keep hidden, and I realized they might serve a purpose. So I began to speak. At first in small gatherings, then to larger groups, support circles for those who had been gaslit, silenced, erased by the very people meant to protect them. I shared my story not to relive the pain, but to offer a lifeline to others still drowning in theirs. And every time I spoke, I felt the chains loosen a little more. One evening, after a long day, I walked to the ocean. The waves roared like a hymn of freedom, crashing against the shore with relentless truth. I stood barefoot on the sand, the wind tugging at my hair, the salt stinging my lips. For years, I had clung to the illusion of family, desperate for love that came only in conditions and comparisons. Now, I let it go. Behind me lay the wreckage of their lies, fragments I no longer carried. Ahead stretched an open horizon, endless, unclaimed. "They lost me," I whispered into the wind. But I found myself. The tide surged forward, washing over my feet, pulling the sand from beneath me. I did not resist. I let it carry the last remnants away, scattering them into the sea where they could sink, forgotten. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of who I was without them. For the first time, I was free.